When I began my healing journey, after years of going in and out of outpatients and many different programs that were for like all different types of addictions, because not only did I struggle with just like substance dependencies, but I also had so many different behaviors that were very addictive, like codependency, addicted to relationships, addicted to people. There is such thing as love addiction where you're really just like seeking for intimacy within relationships and like staying within these relationships despite being toxic and abusive. So many different areas of my life it showed up in. And well, I feel blessed because I have noticed that when your life is clearly not when it's in shambles, it's a lot easier to admit something isn't going right. This can really delay the process of seeing that you need to dive in deeper of your psyche and a lot of the past hurts. So, with the areas that didn't meet the needs that I was seeking at the time, there wasn't a lot of connection between trauma and addiction. And the more we step into this day and age, the more correlation there is with that trauma. Addiction is because there was such a painful circumstance where its use seemed like of relief. As Dr. Gabor Mate says, that its use is a way to deal with abnormal circumstances, meaning that we're brought up in a sick society, like sick literally and sick figuratively, as if like our perception of what is normal is actually quite the opposite of what us as human beings are designed to be. So for my healing process, it was necessary for me to dive into how did I get this way? And obviously, I did not put together like historical events as being a factor. Most people don't want to look to their past. They think that, oh, I've moved beyond that, or this is something that I went through years ago. If there is somewhere in your life that is not aligned with how you feel that you are meant to be living, or if there's some place that you are ultimately not happy with, there's something in your past that is absolutely a subconscious belief system that continues to hold back your behaviors and decisions that prevent you from aligning to your authentic choices. Like most of our choices are fear based choices. And that goes from anywhere from the type of job that we have because we think that it'll make more money. And also from fear based choices at being in relationship because we're afraid of leaving people either to hurt them or we are afraid we won't do better. This is our person and it has to work out. Started with looking at how I was raised. Why did I have the perceptions of myself that I had? Mainly because of my caregivers. And it's like, okay, if I'm formed by my caregivers' ideals and belief and values, then what was it that made my caregivers act and parent in the way that they did for me? I really had to dig into my caregiver circumstances and then to look at the years of the year my mom was born. So it was 1964. What was going on at that time? So the civil rights movement everything was very strong within that at that time. And my grandma was born in 32. And so what was going on at that time? World War II was just about, she was a product of the families that migrated from Europe to here. So she's first generation American. And those were my two primary caregivers. And so to look at things like, okay, what was going on within the world at that time? If my grandma was the baby of 13 children on a farm that was built by a Slovakian immigrant. Like that's some hardcore stuff. And so what were the values that were going on there? You could not afford to live from a place of your true heart. And the opportunities that were not there, that were not for my grandma, is my grandma went above and beyond to make sure that her children did not. And so, therefore, she stood in this very toxic and abusive relationship with an unfaithful man, which formed the way that my mom is. My mom was not able, doesn't trust men, and is very reluctant to allow people in. A lot of my core beliefs stem from that. Once I was able to find compassion for my mom and see, okay, so like my grandma who mainly raised her wasn't necessarily the saint that I always thought that she was. And the things that I thought were natural growing up were not. And so a lot of the belief systems are from a societal and a cultural viewpoint of how to get by in society. We're like, you can't survive or you thrive. Our survival is literally about keeping alive. It's not about thriving. When we are in a fear, like a fight or flight response, it has nothing to do with emotional satisfaction. It has to do with keeping our physical vessel safe. And that clearly is not, that is more of a barbaric type of way to live because we have emotions, we have emotional needs, we have emotional ways, responses. And really, back in the day, it was seen as a threat to even think about an emotional response because it would slow you down. And that's really where you began to disassociate between, okay, I can't feel this right now because I have to keep moving forward, or I can't deal with this right now because I have to keep my family safe. So, what was going on when my grandma was born? What could it have looked like in the eyes of a child that is the baby of 13 children to marry into, my grandfather, who my grandma married, was also first generation immigrant from Germany. So, like, all of these things just come to, and if I so what they were experiencing was strictly survival and how to get by. Then they have the children, my mom's generation, not the baby boomers. It's like the late end of the baby boomers. So that's Gen X. I'm not 100% sure. And they were breaking free out of the division and the separation and wanting to have a lot more integration. And they didn't know how to go about doing that because really it was like in a society that deems as like a threat. And it was so, like, people were literally threatened by other nationalities, other races. And so that's where a lot of those belief systems also come in, a lot of the rebellious, and also a lot of the stigmas around mental health and addictions come in because it has to do with, so people who had PTSD, but it wasn't actually known as PTSD. It was just, oh, he was in the war, or they came back and they were never the same. Alcohol at the time was the only thing that was like really available. That's not necessarily true because there also was a marijuana and opium and morphine. It was either, oh, they're messed up from the war, or there's something wrong with them. Church was a huge part of how people operated in the world as well, because there was such a huge divide and so much anger within everything. Church was a place where they could come together and felt a sense of community, that where they could feel a sense of open arms, and it had really, at that time, being a part of a tribal community meant life or death because you needed the community. You needed those resources for mental support or physical stability, way to feel like you were a part of something. So religion was a huge part of that generation coming out of the war. And it then created many different divides that created a hierarchy and a patriarchy among what religion people are in or the way that people move about in the world, and also then created an economical divide. What type of people go to what type of churches, and what type of people go to. And if you were seen, and especially people that have drug or alcohol using in an unnatural way, people tend to neglect the church because they probably felt shat upon and not supported. And also because nobody could understand and they didn't know how to talk about the things that they saw. There's just so many different divides that show up within the realms of religion, within the realms of creating a community and what people would press in order to feel a part of this community. It was like abandoning yourself in order to not seem like you are unfit to be a part of that club. And so, if we could just look at the many layers that are there, like where do you sell yourself short in order to be a part of a certain group? Where do you compromise your values, beliefs, and morals and see as actually better for you, but you don't act upon it because you don't want to be judged? What are some of the core beliefs within your world today that you see a cycle of repetitive that you aren't able to quit or self-sabotage? You continue to see yourself in a cycle of the same patterns and behaviors that will require you to look into those past events and to really get to the core. And that is how we wind up like gaining a different sense of perception, is by going beyond our limited perspective, right? Going beyond what we see is our truth and seeing that the compassion that we can get by learning how to place ourselves in other people's shoes is invaluable and needed at this time. And so the invitation is for you to take a look at some of the abilities that you have. You have that awareness. You are able to question things. It doesn't have to be my way. All it is just stepping outside of the little box that we live in and take a bigger look and question it like, okay, is this really serving what I feel is for my highest good? Is this is from a fear-based cycle because I'm afraid of losing someone, because I'm afraid of not making enough money? Am I making this choice or staying in this relationship because I don't know what comes after that? Or it could even be something as simple as, why am I not able to stop scrolling on Instagram or Facebook? Why am I not able to change my eating habit? It all comes down to an emotional aspect. And those emotional aspects are tied to limited perceptions of our beliefs and within what is true for us. If we are acting against what is actually true for us, this requires us to compensate in some other way. The point of this is to understand where we are in dissonance with our authentic heart. It's an exploration of barriers, it's an exploration of narratives, it's an exploration of what we tell ourselves. And there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of taking stock of this. And, a lot of the also like a metaphysical way we can look through this too is y- root chakra. Our root chakra and sacral chakra, which are the first two chakras within our energy center connected to what we are experiencing within the world. We live at a primal and make choice state because we're afraid of our physical vessel not being safe. So a lot of the themes that will come up is a theme of oppression, a theme of not being able to express ourselves, a theme of action, and anger is coming in. So look into the root chakra and to the sacral chakra when we are working with these energies and connecting both the material realm and also the ethereal realm. So I will give also insights into what crystals we can work with, but type of energies we can work with within astrology, gene keys, and ascended masters, and our archangel realms. I will dive into that a little bit more throughout the month and I ponder some of these questions and see how this is for you. This can be a very difficult thing to think about. However, it's very empowering. It isn't either or. Like it is for me, my mom had some really messed up ways of bringing me about. And also, I see that she couldn't do any better. And I'm very grateful for that. It's all of those things. It's not either or. It, yes, my mom was raised terribly, by my grandma who did the best that she could. And I was raised the best that I could by someone who was so abused and didn't notice that. And that doesn't invalidate my experiences or the way that I was raised. It actually empowers me to do multidimensional healing for my mom, for my grandma, for all those generations. And it's not easy. And also, it's very healing. So I just want to thank you for doing the work and for showing up.